The sun beat down hard on Dustwater Gulch, turning the corral into a pit of fire and dust. The crowd pressed close to the fence, hats low, eyes fixed on the chaos inside. A man screamed as he hit the ground, bones snapping like dry twigs. His hat rolled through the dirt, his pride somewhere under the stallion's pounding hooves. Thunderjaw reared, muscles slick with sweat, eyes wild as if the devil himself had stitched fury into his hide. The widow stood at the fence, black coat snapping in the hot wind, silver spurs glinting like the edge of a knife. Her voice cut through the noise, steady and sharp. 25, she said, and not one lasted. No one answered. Men shuffled, boots grinding in the dust. The smell of sweat and fear thickened the air. The stallion pawed the earth, snorted, turned, ready to kill whoever dared next. The widow's eyes swept over the crowd. Ranch hands, drifters, bounty men. Not one would meet her gaze. They all knew her story. They all feared her horse. Then a voice came from the edge of the crowd. Calm, low, I'll ride him. Heads turned. A stranger stood there, coat faded, dust in his hair, a shadow where his name should be. He stepped through the fence as if the air itself parted for him. The crowd murmured, half mocking, half afraid. You, one man barked, spitting. He'll throw you faster in, he breathes. The stranger didn't look at him. His eyes were on the stallion. Two quiet storms meeting across the pen. The widow's lips tightened. You know what you're asking for? He nodded once. I do. She studied him. No swagger, no grin, just stillness. Then prove it, Cowboy. Thunderjaw screamed and kicked, dust boiling beneath him. The stranger stepped closer, slow, careful, every move deliberate. The horse's nostrils flared, teeth flashing white. The crowd held its breath. The widow's hand rested on the rail, knuckles pale. The man reached for the reins, not rough, not afraid, just steady. The stallion jerked back, but the cowboy didn't flinch. He whispered something, words lost to the wind, and the beast paused, ears twitching, confused by the calm. A single sound broke the tension, the squeak of leather as the man swung into the saddle. Gasps rose. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then Thunderjaw exploded. The corral shook. Hooves thundered. The crowd roared. The widow's heart slammed against her ribs as dust swallowed everything. 10 seconds, someone yelled. 15. Still he stayed on. Teeth grit. Eyes locked forward. Every motion fused with the stallion's rage. The widow's voice barely rose above the storm. Ride him, Cowboy, ride him. And through the whirling dust, the stranger leaned low, whispered again, and for a fleeting breath, the beast began to listen. Thunderjaw lunged sideways, throwing a wall of dust into the air. The corral boards rattled under his hooves, the sound like gunfire cracking through the desert heat. The stranger's hat flew off, his hair whipping in the wind, but his hand never left the reins. The crowd shouted, some cheering, some cursing, all wide-eyed. The widow stood at the fence, her jaw locked, her fingers gripping the rail hard enough to draw blood. The stallion twisted, bucked, then rose onto his hind legs, black mane flying. For a moment, the rider hung between sky and death. Then, slam! The horse came down hard. Dust exploded beneath them, swallowing both in a cloud of sunlit grit. 30 seconds, someone cried. The man didn't answer. His eyes were fixed forward, steady, as if every violent motion was part of some rhythm only he could hear. He moved with the beast, not against it. Shoulders low, knees firm, every breath timed with Thunderjaw's fury. The widow had seen dozens ride before, stronger men, louder men, but never one like this. There was no shouting, no pride, no fear, just silence and grit and something deeper, something old. Thunderjaw screamed, spinning in circles, foam flying from his mouth. The stranger leaned close, murmuring words no one could catch. The crowd fell quiet, their cheers dying into stillness. For the first time, the stallion hesitated. His breaths came heavy, his rage slowing, eyes flicking toward the man on his back. The cowboy's hand brushed his neck, not a command but a promise. Then, like a storm losing its fight, Thunderjaw lowered his head. The widow blinked, not believing it. The air trembled in the sudden quiet. The man slid from the saddle, boots sinking into dust. The stallion didn't move, only watched him, chest heaving, sides glistening in the dying sun. The cowboy reached out again, ran a hand down the horse's neck. "Easy now," he said softly. "You ain't angry. You're just remembering." The widow stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "He listens to no one." The man turned, dust clinging to his face, sweat streaking the lines around his eyes. "He ain't listening," he said. "He's understanding." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. No one breathed. Thunderjaw snorted once, then bowed his head to the earth. The stranger's hand fell to his side. He just needed someone who's been broken too. The widow's throat tightened, words caught somewhere between disbelief and awe. The wind carried the smell of rain and iron. The man picked up his hat, brushed off the dirt, and looked at her, eyes dark, haunted, steady. "Guess I proved it," he said quietly. Then he turned from the corral, leaving hoof prints, dust, and a silence that felt like the first peace the land had seen in years. The lantern flickered between them, throwing long shadows across the wooden walls. Outside, the night wind moaned through the shutters like a restless ghost. The widow sat stiff-backed at the table, a half-empty glass trembling in her hand. Across from her, the cowboy sat silent, hat on the table, eyes fixed on the flame. "You shouldn't have been able to do that," she said finally, her voice brittle as old rope. "No man should have." The cowboy didn't look up. Maybe he wasn't fighting a man. The widow's jaw tightened. "You speak in riddles, stranger." He shrugged slightly. "Maybe that's all truth is out here. Dust and riddles." A clock ticked somewhere in the house, slow and steady. The silence between each tick seemed to stretch forever. The widow leaned forward, eyes sharp but glimmering with something softer beneath. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. In his eyes, the way he hesitated, the cowboy nodded. He remembered something, someone. The glass clinked against the table. "My husband," she said. He was the only one Thunderjaw ever let near him. They were, her voice cracked, then steadied, bound to each other, till the day he died. The cowboy said nothing. The flames swayed. "He died trying to prove he could still break what couldn't be broken," she went on. "Got thrown. Neck snapped before I could reach him." Her eyes drifted toward the window, toward the barn where Thunderjaw now stood calm and quiet. "I buried him out by the creek, and I buried the rest of myself with him." The cowboy's hand flexed once on the table. "And every man since?" Her gaze hardened. "They came to claim him. I let them try. I wanted them to fail. Maybe I wanted to see the world bleed like I did." The cowboy's eyes lifted to hers, steady, unreadable. "And what do you see now?" The question hung in the air. The wind hissed against the window pane. She swallowed hard. "You didn't come here for the horse, did you?" He leaned back, shadows cutting across his face. "Didn't come for much of anything. Been riding a long time. Trying to forget what I lost." Her voice softened. "A woman." He shook his head. "A brother. Army took him. War took the rest." The widow's eyes glistened, and the tightness in her shoulders eased just a little. "Then maybe that's why Thunderjaw listened. Maybe he knew your kind of silence." The cowboy glanced toward the window, where the horse's silhouette moved slow under the moonlight. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe he was just waiting on you to stop making him remember pain." Her lips trembled, then curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You think I can?" He stood, picking up his hat. "You already did." And before she could answer, he stepped into the night, leaving the door open just long enough for the desert wind to whisper through her house, soft, like forgiveness. The morning broke cold and still. A trail of hoof prints led away from the Hawthorne Ranch, cutting through the mist like the memory of something that refused to fade. The widow stood by the fence, shawl wrapped tight, eyes fixed on the horizon. Thunderjaw grazed quietly behind her, calm, gentle, almost human in the way he watched the empty road. The corral was silent now. No shouting, no dust, just the creak of the gate swaying in the dawn wind. The crowd had gone, leaving only whispers behind. The stranger who rode the devil horse and tamed it with nothing but silence. The widow reached out, running a hand along the rail where he'd leaned the day before. The wood was still warm from the sun that hadn't yet risen. She closed her eyes, hearing his voice again, steady, low, honest. "You already did." Thunderjaw snorted softly, turning his head toward her, as if to say what she couldn't. By noon, the stranger's tracks had vanished into the desert. Some said he'd headed west toward the mesas. Others swore he just disappeared, dissolved into the sand and sky like a ghost tired of wandering. Weeks passed, then months. The widow opened the ranch again, took on new hands, rebuilt what grief had left hollow. Yet every night, when the wind howled through Dustwater Gulch, she'd pause by the window, staring out at the trail, waiting for that lone silhouette to appear again. It never did. Years later, folks still spoke of that day. The 25th man, the quiet rider who tamed Thunderjaw when no one else could. His name was never known, but his story grew taller with each telling. In the saloon at the edge of town, an old storyteller sat beneath the lamp's low glow, pipe smoke curling through the air. His voice rasped like sandpaper over wood. "They say he rode in from nowhere," he said, "and left the same way. Didn't come for fame, didn't come for love. Came to remind folks that not all battles are fought with guns." The men around him listened close, glasses half raised, the room gone still. The old man leaned forward, eyes gleaming through the haze. Some say the widow smiled again after that day. Others say she never did. But the horse, Thunderjaw, never bucked another soul. That's how you know it's true. The wild knows its own. He puffed once, letting the smoke drift upward like dust from the past. "And if you ride out past the red mesa when the moon's hanging low," he whispered, "you might see him still. One rider on a pale horse, moving with the wind. Don't wave. Don't call. Just tip your hat and let him pass." The room stayed quiet a long while after. Outside, the desert wind sighed against the door, carrying the ghost of hoofbeats, soft, steady, and fading west. The legend of the lone cowboy lived on, whispered by the wind, believed by the broken, and remembered by the free.